We're told that the ancient world was divided like the modern one, black and white, superior and inferior. But what if that's a lie? What if race, as we know it, didn't even exist in the minds of the ancients? What if Greeks admired Ethiopians, Romans took orders from Africans, and identity wasn't about color, but about culture, wisdom, and power? Let's take a journey through time and rediscover what the ancients really thought. To understand race in antiquity, we must begin with this truth. The ancient world didn't see skin color as a marker of human value. In Rome, the key question was, are you a Roman citizen? Freeborn or slave, noble or commoner, educated or not, these defined you. In Greece, to be Greek meant you spoke the language, practiced Greek customs, and engaged in public life. The modern idea of race, biologically fixed, hierarchical, color-coded, didn't exist. Excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. Nowhere does he say excellence belongs to any race. The Greeks and Romans wrote often about Africans, especially Egyptians and Ethiopians. And what they said may surprise you. Of all men, the Ethiopians are the most beautiful. He praised their physical features, their culture, and their moral values. Go to Ethiopia to feast with the blameless Ethiopians, not to Europe, not to Greece, but to Africa. And the Egyptians? The Greeks learned from them. Almost all the names of the gods came into Greece from Egypt. The Egyptians were the first to discover the year and divide it into 12 parts. The Greeks owe much of their knowledge to Egyptian priests. Plato described how the Greek education system was modeled on the ancient Egyptians, whom he considered masters of wisdom, geometry, and spiritual science. Africa was not seen as a monolith. The ancient world recognized its vast diversity. Berbers of North Africa were respected warriors and horsemen. Nubians were famed for their precision in archery, and ruled over Egypt during the 25th dynasty. Ethiopians had advanced ironwork, agriculture, and religion. Egyptians built some of the most enduring monuments and systems of knowledge the world has ever seen. The Romans knew this. The Greeks knew this. They did not lump Africa into one racial box. In Rome, an African-born man named Septimius Severus became emperor. He was born in Leptis Magna, which is modern-day Libya, and ruled from 193 to 211 CE. What allowed him to rise? Roman identity, citizenship, and military strength, not his skin tone. Meanwhile, a Germanic barbarian, pale-skinned and blonde, who couldn't read Latin or obey Roman law, would be considered inferior. In the Roman world, a dark-skinned scholar from Alexandria had more privilege than a light-skinned peasant from the north. Color meant very little. Civilization meant everything. The ancient world practiced slavery, yes, but not racial slavery. That's a European invention. Greeks enslaved other Greeks. Romans enslaved everyone. Britons, Syrians, Gauls, Nubians, Persians. Slaves were prisoners of war, debtors, or born into it, but not enslaved because of race. In fact, some slaves became wealthy freedmen, philosophers, and even imperial advisors. The concept of black equals slave didn't exist until Europe built racial slavery to justify empire and colonization. To understand how race came to be rigidly defined in modern times, we have to look at the 15th to 18th centuries during the age of exploration and the transatlantic slave trade. Before this era, ancient societies didn't have the concepts of race we use today. Greeks and Romans, for instance, had ethnic identities, but not the biological categorization we think of when we say black or white. These ideas emerged much later as Europeans began their imperial conquests across the globe. As European empires expanded, they turned to Africa for cheap, abundant labor. But to justify the inhumane treatment of millions of African people, they constructed a narrative of racial inferiority. Thinkers like Johann Friedrich Blumenbach categorized humans into races, placing Caucasians at the top and Africans at the bottom. These pseudo-scientific ideas justified slavery and colonization. Biblical myths like the Curse of Ham were twisted to imply that Africans were destined for servitude. Laws like the Virginia Slave Codes of 1705 institutionalized racial slavery, legally separating Africans from white indentured servants and denying them rights. European colonialism spread white supremacy under the guise of civilizing primitive peoples. the racial divide became essential to imperial control. By the 19th century, social Darwinism further entrenched these ideas, claiming that some races were more fit to survive than others. All of this was new. It had nothing to do with antiquity. The idea of race as we understand it today, biological, hierarchical, and fixed, was not a part of the ancient world. Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, and others may have recognized ethnic groups, but they didn't use skin color to define a person's worth or status in society. It was only with the rise of colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade that the idea of race began to be rigidly defined, primarily to justify the exploitation of millions of people based on the color of their skin. Racial categories were invented for political and economic gain, and science was manipulated to support these distortions. If we truly want to move past the racial divisions of today, we must acknowledge that race is a social construct, not a biological fact. The ancient world tells us that identity, humanity, and worth are far more complex than what modern history has taught us. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit. This quote reminds us that what makes us human is not the color of our skin but the values we uphold, the values of excellence, knowledge, and humanity.